Grand dawning, great rising, good afternoon, good evening to you, wherever you may be in the world. Welcome to another edition of 360 Info Network. I'm Vince Robinson. Our brother Hamtonio is away, and he will join us again next week. Today, we have a really interesting show for you. We are bringing someone on today who can have an intelligent conversation with you about cryptocurrency. We're going to get into some metaphysics and some other things, but we want to address cryptocurrency, financial therapy. He is a financial therapist, a cultural and memory recovery specialist, and a STEAM educator. So we're going to get into that as well. Before we get to the show, I just have to let you know a few things about what's going on at Larchmere Arts. Mark your calendars for the 30th of May. We're going to welcome back Gloria Cummings Jones with her trio of Ed Ridley, Elijah Gilmore, and Brad McGee. So, again, mark your calendars. It's going to be a great evening of jazz in that space. We're also looking at doing an event on June 7th. We're going to bring Brother Gilmore back for poetry and percussion. So, I'll be accompanying him on piano, and we will do some spoken word with that as well. So, a lot going on in Cleveland, but we definitely want you to know about those two things. Like to welcome to the show Brother M'Bwebe Ishangi. And this brother, we met a couple years ago, and I knew back then that he was very heavily involved in cryptocurrency. And I had wanted to have him on the show for a number of weeks. And then this past week, it finally happened. So I'm pleased to welcome to the show Brother M'Bwebe Ishangi. I could read a bio and I could read your words, but I think you could do a much better job of telling us who you are and what you've been doing and why it's important that we receive your message today. So why don't we start with that?
But I'll say, Pop, brother, appreciate you for having me on the show. Greetings, everyone. My name is M'Bwebe Ishangi. Um, I like to start out always by saying that I'm an everyday person. So there's nothing really special about me. It's really about what I have an interest in. And that at the core is the emancipation of and liberation of African people around the globe. I study history. I've been studying history for over 30 years. I started a magazine in 1991 called, I'm like 1993 rather, called the Ghetto Times Magazine. And it basically, I would take the works of our scholars, our giants, our John Henry Clark's, our Chancellor Williams, Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, etc., and take the information and digest it in a format to where people in the street could understand it. So I would use a little bit of ebonics and things of that nature to give it a little bit of a flavor that would be appealing to the younger demographic because we are not reading, especially those thick books with no pictures. But by trade, I'm also a brand identity marketing specialist. I deal with graphic, web development, anything visual. I'm always been a visual artist at my core. Um, and at the other part of it is learning that in order to liberate oneself, um, there's something in the way. And it's always been. It took a while for me to get it, but once I realized it, that was when I came out with my sixth book called A Pot to Piss in Intergenerational Wealth Planning for Black People. Is money, finances. We were not born to work. And if you think about it, we are the only species on the planet that has to pay rent to live here. And so money has always been that problem, that obstacle that has stopped us from being that free spirited person we were as children. We were programmed after being, in school that, okay, we had to stop asking questions and fall in line. Don't, raise your hand to have a permission to have a question, even go to the restroom. Putting us into a mindset of that we cannot explore anymore. We had to basically be spoon fed and then directed on how you were supposed to live. This is what's gotten in the way of not only liberation for us as a people, but just as you as a human spirit and your human experience. So why am I here? A lot of us don't even put in the time to figure out, why was I born? What's my true purpose? What's my mission? And because of that, I think that's the reason why we keep coming back. That's metaphysical. But the point is that the goal is to, for me and all my works, is to try to expose us to the lies that we've been exposed or shared or embedded in us, and learning how to decipher what is true and what is truth, and using this information, using history, using a timeline, as Asa Hilliard said, if you study history, do it in chronological order, so we understand what else was going on in the world when things were being developed. Where's our place? Where are we seen? Where are we free? Where are we in bondage? So that we can understand how we got to where we are and why we have yet to arrive. So in a nutshell, that's what my passion is. It extends into community growth. I'm a STEAM educator as well. I feel like understanding the principles of science, technology, engineering, arts, and math is important, because it's one thing to know your story, but it's another to be able to build it and rebuild it into today's form. So
Mhm.
thank you, brother, for having me here.
You know, it's really interesting when you talked about initially being about the liberation of African people, but then you also talked about how money is used in our society, and it's used as a means of control. You know, your access to money is controlled, and your freedom is tied to your ability to create those resources. When you have money, you can do things. When you don't have money, you can't do things. So
Facts.
there's been a real intentionality about keeping us away from understanding how we can acquire capital and use it as leverage to acquire our freedom. We go back to J.D. Rockefeller and
Yep.
his connection with education, and it was about creating workers. Basically, he was saying we don't want them to think,
Yeah.
we just want them to do.
Yep.
So we go to this idea that go to school, get a job, and the result of that, if you're blessed enough to be able to get a job, and a quote unquote good job, you just end up being a slave for the rest of your life to the debt that you created to have this lifestyle. And
Yeah.
so many times, and I'm just, just thinking about the reality of things. We put so much energy into acquiring things that have no value other than the fact that we can say that we have them.
Yeah.
But all these resources go nowhere towards our freedom and our liberation. You know, lately there's been internet buzz about how they create these high priced goods in China, and then we spend thousands of dollars for them. And the
Hmm.
Chinese are laughing at us because they say, "Oh, this is a $15 handbag and you just
Yep.
paid $15,000 for it." And
Yep.
this $15,000 handbag is supposed to somehow make you feel better about yourself because you have the ability to acquire it. But you're thinking of things on an individual basis and not a collective basis. And I think that's probably where we have gone wrong as a group of people in this nation, because we haven't been thinking collectively. We've been thinking individually, and it's partly because of the indoctrination that we've gotten from those who quote unquote educate us. So you
Yes.
talk about science, technology, engineering, art, and math. I'm an arts advocate, among other things, in M'Bwebe.
Hmm.
And so I'm looking at the landscape of funding for arts. I'm looking at different cities, how much they invest. I can see, based on what I've read, that there is a sevenfold return on an investment in art. So you
Mm.
spend $1 on art, you get $7 back.
Mm.
Now, in this world of cutbacks, if I was looking at a deficit in a city, I'd be looking at ways to increase the pot,
Exactly.
thinking of that pot to piss in.
Yeah.
But
Hmm.
we don't think that way. Instead, we'll make investments in public safety officers,
Right.
you
Right.
know, and they're there because they got to continue to patrol the slaves.
Hmm. It's interesting that so at the core, it's systemic, because it wouldn't be so successful on a global massive scale unless it wasn't systemic. And I'm so glad you mentioned Rockefeller, because even though his father is from New York, John D was, well, he was born in New York too, but his roots are in Cleveland, right there in Cleveland. And in my latest book that's come out in a few weeks, I actually did a lot of research on Rockefeller, man. And the thing for me is that this is one guy that he's an oligarch, and his oligarchy has so massive and strong that it's still in operation today. And the thing that I learned about Rockefeller is that he wasn't just about, oil. He wasn't just about, banking and finance. This guy he was really truthful about wanting to control everything. He meant what he said, is that he wanted a nation of workers, not thinkers. And he understood in order to do that, you had to create a system. And that system was the educational system and also the medical system, where he basically hijacked the whole entire operation to make folks think that education is the key. Getting these degrees are what's successful. How you're going to attain these degrees doesn't matter. You're going to take out loans. You're going to may get a grant here and there, but you're going to get these certificates of higher training and then spend your entire adult lives trying to pay it off, instead of being able to use that intelligence that you acquired to break off and do your own thing. And so that's the thing, is that we think systemically, and it's been embedded in us from, I would say from colonization, is that we put value in material things because we didn't have it. There was a time where we didn't have it, and we still feel those things embedded genetically from our ancestors who were deprived of stuff. Even some of us came up deprived. So now you have a job, and because materials are what drives this world, attaining those material items, we want to collect all these things because that to us makes us feel like we arrived. And you made a very good point about folks in Asia, but it's America's own detriment, because America wanted to be cheap on a dollar and outsource their goods to other places where they feel like, oh, we can get it for half, a penny on the dollar, opposed to paying American workers. We'll outsource it. Well, what Asia did was smart. Now, I just want to point out this thing about history. This is why when you talk about therapy that we all need, we gotta fuse in history, because that's the reason why we behave the way we have, because of the historical timeline. So in Asia, when they were being outsourced to build computers, to build Nikes, a pair of sneakers, they required for you to give them the blueprint. You had to give us the blueprint on how this thing is manufactured. So you have these multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar companies that are sending them the how to make it to these places, which is this what gave birth to, I'll call it the white market. It isn't the black market, because there's always something negative connotated to black. But this is the way they created the white market, where they said, okay, we're going to make these knockoffs. And the really interesting thing to me is when we talk about, if there's any youth listening, we talk about reps, sneakers, right? I've had conversations with a lot of youth that talk about how they would never wear a pair of reps, which is a replica. It's short for replica of a pair of Nikes, because it's not made by Nike, but it's made in Asia, and you're paying much less, right? And I said, well, you'll pay $300-400 for a pair of sneakers, but won't buy the rep, which is probably $100 or $50, because it's a rep. Are people really using a microscope to look at your shoes and see that it's missing one thing, or it actually looks exactly like the same kind? No, but that's the materialism that's been put out by America, that if it isn't expensive, then it ain't worth nothing. And we will do whatever we can to give up our bottom dollar to look good, because we've never had. So it is a psychosis that we suffer from because we haven't had. And I think once we start talking about the bare bones of that and realizing that we can now make this turn, this pivot on understanding that all this stuff is an illusion and it's not necessary. What's really most important is the acquisition of land and independence. When you're able to create your own thing, when you can industrialize your production on a massive scale, then that is when you have financial and cultural communal freedom. But that's a discussion that I hope that we are going to have today.
Oh yeah. I mean, and that's something that we talk about all the time. One of the things that some of us are most excited about is what's going on in Burkina Faso,
Yes.
because you
Salute.
got leadership that
Salute.
understands the value of that
Salute.
land and
That.
the significance of the goods that you create with the resources that you have in your own land. It really does not make sense for us to send these mineral resources and other resources to other countries,
That
let
part.
them make something, and then send it back to us and charge us through the nose for it, you know.
Yep.
And when you talk about colonization, that's what it was all about. You
Yeah.
know, they were intentional about keeping Africa in this place of perceived poverty. And I
Yes.
say perceived poverty because you sitting on all this wealth in the ground, but then you ship it out to other places. We should be the Mansa Musas of the world right now.
Facts. Facts.
You know,
The caucasity of white folk is that when you think about it, they produce nothing. Everything is exported or imported rather. And how they convinced us, and again, it's something. So when we talk about slavery, we always want to talk about American slavery, but it's a global thing. Colonization is a global matter. And when you think about what they did, they convinced our people via miseducation and also military might to, as you mentioned, lease out our resources. And not and you know I'm so proud of what Brother Ibrahim Traore is doing, because he's kicking the French out. He's letting them know, look, this is our resources, these are our uh this is on our land. Without us, you are nothing, and we understand this now, and we're going to do something about it, not just talk the talk. But that's the problem. How did they convince us to believe that we needed to outsource our material for their wealth and get nothing in return? Nothing in return. And at the same time, the slave labor we talk about that happened here in America is still happening on the continent because of these uh, European and Asian uh, communities that are going in there and trying to take over our land. So I salute what brother's doing, and I hope that most people will at least educate themselves about the reasoning, because we what we hear is America saying, I forgot the general's name, the black general who's out here talking about he's against Traore and he's trying to take him down or whatever. And they're using him as the scapegoat because he's black, right? And he's a general. I get all that. But America's always saying American interests, right? We're going after American interests. And I look at that in a different way now, because when we talk about interest, people think about financial interest, as far as the gains of interest, right? The interest is beyond that. The interest is, I'm interested in controlling. I want to have what you have. I can't produce it here. Switzerland does not create chocolate, but Switzerland is known for having some of the best chocolate in the world, right? There are no cacao plants that can grow in that climate. The vanilla bean being promoted as the color white when we know vanilla is actually the same color as chocolate. But we can't have Neapolitan, which is another funny thing. Neapolitan ice cream with two brown colors and then a strawberry, right? So there has to be this connotation of white supremacy in everything. That's the way they think. That's the way they operate. And they've convinced us to accept it without question. So I see that, these are again, therapy to me goes beyond just talking about, okay, well, how can I make more money? We need to understand that it's about power, structure, and control. And it's been done in a systemic way that's been in existence for several millennia. And it's getting even stronger now as we head into the fourth industrial complex.
mm,
So we need to
I'm glad
participate.
I'm glad you mentioned therapy, because part of your descriptor is being a financial therapist. So talk to us about what financial therapy looks like.
Okay. So um, let me just say this quote I love to use. It's written by John. It's said by John Ron. He said, if you don't design your own life plan, chances are you'll follow someone else's plan. And what do they have planned for you? Not much. So when we think about how we live our lives, and we think that the path of success is, get your degrees, get it, get your education, then you'll somehow land a job to pay off these degrees that you tried to attain if you didn't get scholarships. Um, So we spend our lives trying to, our first introduction to money is about acquiring it, because once you get this, then you can buy that. The house with the White House with the picket fence, the 2-car garage, all these material items are what we are told is what a basis of success is. So although they promote how to get all these things, or not how to, but the pursuit of attaining all these things, they never tell you how you're going to pay for it. Right? For instance, if you buy a house and you get a 15 to 30-year mortgage, you are telling the bank that I'm promising you that I'm going to pay for this house for 15 to 30 years every month. Right? You're promising this. And they're saying, okay, cool. If you go 90 days plus without a payment, we'll come and take it. I don't care if it's in your 29th month, 29th year, and your 8th month of the year. If you are 90 days behind, we're going to take your house. I don't care, you've been paying us for 30 years, right? And so we're taking on this agreement, not realizing we have nothing to back it up. Your job doesn't give you a contract for 29 years or 30 years, does it? Your job is as long as you have it. And then these days we're finding that, layoffs and are happening more often, and they'll only increase because of artificial intelligence being able to replace the workforce. So our ability to earn capital is in question. It's in peril. But the point is that it's always been this way. You've never had a job that said, hey, I'll allow you to be here for 30 years. You're going to be here until they don't need you anymore. And when you lose that job, so does your ability to pay for that mortgage. So now you got to find something else. Or even while you're working, that's not paying enough. So you got to get a second or third job. So you're spending your life trying to pay for something that you were told to attain, which will make you successful, those nice cars and house, and you're working yourself to death. Well, this is why we have what's called that thing called the midlife crisis. When you get in your 40s, man, I've been doing this for 20 some odd years. The job, although I'm thankful I have one, because everybody always complains, but they ended up with saying, well, at least I have a job. We always say that, that we're still unfulfilled because we're paying bills. As soon as we get paid, it's like a hot potato that goes right back out our hand. We don't get to invest, or if we do invest in something, we don't have the time to educate ourselves on right investments. So we are losing money. We're streaming everything. We're materializing. We're going on vacations. We're doing all these things and not having enough put away. And the saving models that we put stuff in, like your bank account, your savings account, which only gives you less than 0.05% in most cases, or if you put it in a 401k, which is susceptible to the market crash, which happened for me when the housing market happened in 2008. I lost $250,000 in my 401k and didn't realize that it wouldn't be replenished. You're talking about people's nest egg that they're putting money, they're told to put in these places that will be there when you retire. Come to find out they're not there. And then at that point, what can you do? Because you're too old to do something else. So this therapy to me is important, that we understand the path that they told us to go down to create the sustainability isn't sustainable at all. It's sustainable for them. When you're putting money in the bank, it's 10x for the bank, not for you. Okay. Fractional lending system. So as soon as you put in that $1,000 check, it turns into $10,000 for the bank. 9,000 of that goes to the bank to create a loan for someone else, probably even yourself, or trying to get that car loan or that house loan. And then you're going to be paying back the loan plus interest on your own money. This is the way the system has been designed and set up. And so your money problems, and we all have them, we need to understand that why do so many of us have these money problems? Because it's systemically designed to be so. So once you understand that, you start to understand the nature of how it was created, then we could try to reverse engineer it and put it in other places. Where is Warren Buffett putting his money? Where are, not Elon Musk, because he's a taxpayer billionaire, making his money off of us, but other billionaires, where are they putting their monies to grow and create intergenerational wealth? These are the conversations that we need to have. But in order to do that first, let's understand and diagnose the psychosis, the problem. And the problem is we've never been properly introduced to money and how it works.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about the whole employment paradigm, because as I see it, employment is nothing really more than glorified slavery.
Facts.
And when you talk about the systemic nature of things, it's a model that's based on exploitation at every
Hmm.
turn. It's about
Hmm.
exploitation. I read something yesterday that really kind of caused me to question a lot of things, but it was that when you have a burial plot in a cemetery, from what it was stated, it's like a 20 to 25-year lease.
Mm. Yep.
So that means after 20 to 25 years, they can actually take that casket out of the ground.
Mm.
They take the body that was in the casket and they cremate it,
Mm.
and then they replace it with another casket, and then they recycle the casket.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean,
AI could confirm this, but it's like, and then the other thing that I came across, and it may or may not be true. So y'all, you want to check me, but I'm just saying it was out there. So do your research, but I'm just going to repeat what I heard. And that was that if you bury someone, you bury a loved one in your yard, then you get a different classification for your property, and it means that you don't have to pay property taxes.
yeah, I've heard that.
Going back to this model of exploitation,
Yep.
I paid my house off in 19 years. I took out a 30-year mortgage,
Hmm.
paid it off in 19 years. The plan was to pay it off in 15, but the mortgage changed hands a couple of times, and the amortization tables got thrown off, and they didn't make the adjustments to facilitate my plan because
Right.
my plan wasn't their plan.
Right.
But I'm just thinking about the scenario that you just drew. 29 years, you've been paying this mortgage. You paid way more than the house was worth.
Whoo. Double.
You paid double
Mm.
what it was worth, and then they want to
Mm.
come and yank it back. But the rules are set up for them, not for you.
Right.
That's why you sign that promissory note that puts you in that position to be exploited.
Yeah.
We talk about student loan debt. It's the only unforgivable debt. So you can go to your grave and have to pass that debt on to those who come after you.
Yeah.
And the nation's largest asset is, guess what? Student loan debt.
Hmm.
It's amazing when we think about how we live in this country, that we have this pride about. Oh, I'm an American. We
Hmm.
travel abroad and we're
Hmm.
wearing American on our chest, like it's a Superman S or something. But the fact of the matter is, we getting pimped at every turn, and we accept it, we embrace it, and we glorify it. But I'm learning in M'Bwebe, this is a civilization that's in decline.
Yeah.
And so things are changing rapidly. Now, I was intentional about inviting you to this program because I want to talk to you about cryptocurrency. Obviously, you're someone who knows about it. I know a couple of years ago, you were having conversations about Bitcoin mining. So you have to have a certain skill set to even have those conversations. Before we started the show, I was talking to you about how, because people don't understand it, they don't embrace it, they don't push back on it. But we have a president who is doing all the things that we have issues with, and justifiably so, because
Hmm.
he's proven to us that he doesn't give a doggone about us.
Hmm.
But the one thing that he has gotten right is just giving attention to the cryptocurrency world. And I'm sure that it's something that he wants to exploit for his own personal gain. But this could also be, because of the decentralized nature of it, it could be the thing that allows us entry into this new digital financial structure and use it to our benefit as opposed to our detriment. So let's talk about cryptocurrency for a moment.
Hmm.
From your perspective, what is it and how can we benefit from it?
Uh, Cryptocurrency is a disruptor of a current system. If you are using an analogy of email, so when we think about when email came on the scene, and this is again, a lot of us are been using it for so long, we never really some of us, that's all we know. There's a generation that doesn't know life before email. But for those of that remember, um, we got our information through the post office, right? And if you think about it, in order for you to have an exchange with someone, it could take up to 2 weeks without if you didn't use a phone call, if you use a phone. So if I wrote a letter to you, Vince, and mailed it to you, you would receive it in a few days, and then you would write me back, and that would be your correspondence, and that could take another few days. So anywhere between a week to 2 weeks would be just that one response, call and response. And so when email came on the scene, it immediately cut all that time out. Right now, it's instantaneous. I could send something, and you can receive it, and you can respond, and we could have a dialogue, a full dialogue within a few minutes. This put the United States Postal Service on notice, because now it was like, okay, well, people aren't gonna be sending. I mean, people don't even really use stamps; they just collect them now. They don't really mail stuff out anymore. They pay online, etc. So they had to adjust their model, right? So the internet is the same. I'm sorry, not the internet. The cryptocurrency is the same thing when it comes to finances with money. Uh, one, the USD is tied to the United States. Fiat currency is tied to the United States, although it can be accepted in other countries, but it is tied to the United States. There's certain places you can go and you can give them $1, and they're like, I don't know what you want me to do with that. This is not our currency, so you need to exchange it, right? With digital currency, cryptocurrency, it is it doesn't have it's not tied to any land. And certain coins, the OGs, the original coins that I speak of and that I support, they are open source, they are decentralized, they are not owned by an entity, and so therefore United States or any other country can't put hold their grips on it. All they can do is become whales and buy a bunch of it. So cryptocurrency allows you to, whereas before when you would send money abroad, for instance, you would use TransUnion, which is Rockefeller owned, which I learned. If you want to send money someplace, especially if you want to send it to the diaspora or to the Caribbean, found that there is monetary arbitrage and racism in banking. I go in detail in my book, About to Piss In, but you will pay more money sending money to Africa and to the Caribbean than you would any place else. Okay, so cryptocurrency eliminated all of that, because now I could send money instantaneously to any place in the world. They receive it as Bitcoin, and then they could transfer it into their pesos, dollar, whatever it is their currency in their country is. So it allows you to send money at a fraction of the cost. It's almost instantaneous, a few minutes in some cases, depending on the power of the blockchain network. And it gives you the other part of cryptocurrency, which I love about it, which is something that dollars can never do, is that it has a growth in it, meaning that the value can go up or down, like the market, like the stock market. So, for instance, if you have right now, Bitcoin is at $103,000, right? It's the first coin that surpassed 6 figures. If you had one Bitcoin 6 months ago, and it was 6 months ago, it was roughly around $50,000, right? So that one coin was worth $50,000. Well, because now it's worth $103,000, that same coin has gone up 100%. It's worth $103,000, right? If it was go down, it could go down, and that value, it's volatile, so it goes up and down. But the beautiful thing about it is that you can grow intergenerational wealth from this perspective, because if you attain more coins, and they're not physical coins, it's all digital, it's illusionary. But that's interesting to say that it's something illusionary is more valuable than gold, which is interesting. It surpassed gold a few years ago. But the point is that digital currency allows you to grow, and you can let it sit and let it grow that way. You can also, now they're doing in the gaming aspects, you can get paid in it. With some people are playing games, some people are mining it. Some people are finding other ways to get paid in cryptocurrency, which allows you to grow. Now, the other thing is, too, is if you know how to handle it correctly, you don't liquidate. You never liquidate an appreciating asset, but you can take a loan against it. If you take a loan against it, it's tax-free. So there's certain things and loopholes that you can do. This is what the rich do with their monies, is allows you to still hold the value. You just pay back the loan and then you can get your coin back. But the point is that it allows you to grow exponentially in value, something that a job could never pay you. So cryptocurrency is here. It's started in what year did it start? Shoot. It's going on 20 years old. So it's still relatively new. Its adoption has been very slow. El Salvador is one country that has fully adopted cryptocurrency. They're even their national currency is Bitcoin, and they're actually implementing the teaching of it in their schools now, which is something that I think America will eventually do because America doesn't want to fall behind. But we're seeing that cryptocurrency is something that is a game changer, and it's intimidating initially. But I implore for people of our hue to definitely learn about this space, because no other place, no other time have we been able to grow wealth exponentially than something like this. So, in a nutshell, that's what cryptocurrency is.
Digital currency, and we are in a place now where we have an ability to create currency. We talked briefly about someone that I know that has created his own token. And as you stated, there are a lot of projects that will probably not go anywhere. Check the numbers just before we got on the air. There are 15.13 million cryptocurrencies.
Can I say something? Last year, this
Yes.
time,
Yes.
it was about 100,000. So that's
Yeah.
letting you know all coins aren't good coins. So don't get
Right.
caught up into, oh, this person that comes out with a coin. Do your diligence before you invest in any coin out there.
Right. I think you struck on something that's really important when you talked about the increase in value. Sometimes, we look at the market, a few weeks ago, the market crashed. The stock market crashed, and then within a week or two, it was right back up to where it was before.
Yeah.
But people get nervous when they see these crashes, and then they liquidate. And when they liquidate, the people who have real money, they be like, okay, well, the price is down. Now it's time to buy more. You selling, they buying.
Yep.
Because the mantra is buy low, sell high.
Facts.
And when you're looking at the market, you have to stand back and not just look at those recent days, but you have to look at the overall picture. When you look at that line, it goes up and down, but really it's on an upward trajectory.
Yes.
So when you understand that, you change the paradigm. What we have in our minds is that you work for money. The people who have money let their money make money. They're not working. They got money working for them. So they go to bed, and when they wake up the next morning, they have more money than they had before. Those of us who are in the other paradigm, we're locked into, how am I going to pay that bill? Because we see our money shrinking as opposed to expanding. The other thing that you identified was, perhaps this is kind of unrelated but related, is the whole money supply issue. This country has $36 trillion in debt. $36 trillion.
2 trillion in the last year.
Yeah, and it's $36 trillion that in fact do not exist.
Yep.
In fact, they don't exist because only 5% of the money in circulation is physical currency. So in essence, what it is digital information that is being manipulated.
Yeah.
Back in the day, in M'Bwebe, we used to get cost of living adjustments in our pay. So when inflation went up, our wages were adjusted to account for that inflation, but then they stopped adjusting it for inflation. So that means that your money is worth less. So the more money that they create, the less your money is worth. So going back to that 401k, you got all this money you think that's sitting in that 401k, and it's being eaten up by inflation and fees that the people who manage your money are taking from you. So I'm not a financial advisor, so let me make that clear. I don't
Mhm.
have the knowledge base that Brother M'Bwebe has, but I can tell you that if you have a 401k, you might want to think about putting some of that money into a precious metals account.
Mhm.
Because then if you have gold and silver, you have an asset that can appreciate and not get eaten up by inflation. So there are
Mhm.
things that you can do, and I'm sure you're aware of it as you are a financial therapist. Let's talk about some of the things that people can do immediately. So for instance, if you have $1,000 sitting in a Chase savings account earning 0.01%, you can find a high yield interest account that might give you 2, 3, 4% on the same money as opposed to 0.01%. Talk to us about some of the things that people can do. And I just want to remind the listeners that you are listening to 360 Info Network right here on AM 1490. WERE, our guest is M'Bwebe Ishangi. He is a financial therapist and a few other things that we will get to in the next hour of 360 Info. So give us some stuff that the folks can chew on that are listening by radio today.
Absolutely. So I'm going to tell you, I'll shoot from the hip. I don't pull punches. The banking system arbitrage is synonymous with it. So understand the bank does not care about you. They are competing against other banks. And so, although they at the top of the helm, there is this, this oligarchy of owners, but on the lower part of that spectrum are the banks are competing against each other to get your savings, right? As I mentioned about the when you make a deposit, the 10x that they get, right? So I'm an advocate against putting money into any type of banking system, mainly because the return isn't worth it, especially when you know that there's something else. So the best way to find out what to do, and I'm not saying do as I do, but if you were to do something different, study the people that you admire that have all these billions. Where do they put their money? Do you think Warren Buffett has a savings account at Chase? And if he does, that ain't all his savings. It's just a little bit just to sit there for play money, whatever. But I would say, for instance, my go-to is whole life insurance. Whole life insurance policies, to me, has the greatest return outside of your cryptocurrencies if you want to invest in crypto. But again, that's more volatile and a little bit higher risk. But whole life insurance for the last most top firms have paid over the last 150 years have paid dividends back to the shareholders. So for instance, we as a whole life insurance policy holder, you are now considered part owner of that insurance company, depending on again who you're with. And in most cases, a whole life insurance policy is going to give you a minimum state by state 4% guaranteed return on your investment. So what does that mean? You pay for a whole life insurance policy. So segue, there's term life and there's whole life. Term life is something that you pay for a certain amount of time, 5, 10, 20 years, right? A lot of us have insurance policies that are term. Some of us have policies that are tied to our job. So when the job lets you go, trust your insurance is gone too and all the money that they made from it. So you need to have your own policy. When you have a term policy, 10, 15 years, once that 10 or 15th year is up and you're still alive, all the money you put in, you don't get back. The company keeps. So if you want to be insured, what you got to do? Get another policy, right? So it's just like car insurance. You keep paying, and never get an accident. Sometimes it makes you want to go and just wreck your car because you give them so much money every month, right? But the point is that with whole life insurance, it's a 99 to 101-year lease. So it will outlive you and it can be transferred to your bloodline. You're going to get a state by state 4% guarantee through each policy, right? And it has a dividend that if you put in extra money, part of that money that you're making your premium payment to goes towards a cash asset vault. So if you're paying, and it does cost more, but it grows exponentially more, especially when you add in compound interest. So the money that's growing for you can be accessed And you can use this money while you're alive. Now, with a term life policy, that money can't be used until you die. You don't get to touch it. Your family, your loved ones do. So you have to die in order for your family to get it. In most cases, you're going to get even less if you go through probate, if you don't have a trust. It's going to go through probate, which will take some of that money too, because you probably owe some things. With whole life insurance, especially put behind a trust, is that now the money is, you have full access to it anytime you want, and it's a loan to yourself. So you pay no taxes on it. So if you need graduation or a wedding coming up, instead of using a credit card and paying anywhere between 6 to 19% on that money that you pull out, you can pull it from your whole life insurance policy tax free, no interest, or it'll be very little interest, but you'll pay the interest back to yourself. And if you do not pay back the money, it'll be deducted from the value of your policy. Now, of course, you can't have a $250,000 policy and you pull out $250,000 and then pay it back. No, there's a cutoff. But the point is that it allows you to use these funds in a different way that rich folk do. These are the loopholes that we're not told about. So for me, I'm a strong advocate for putting money in whole life insurance policies, because not only are you insured for, again, 100 plus years, it can be transferred down to your family. You can also have access to the money while you're alive to buy a house, a car, etc., put down a down payment, whatever. And um, it grows exponentially, up to 11%, depending on the company. You could have actually up to 11% added growth annually, and you get a dividend payout annually based upon the birth date of your policy. So that's the one that I would, that's the jewel I would love to share with you all. If you want to know more about it, just hit me up at cryptowealthmovement.com. But having a whole life insurance policy is what is a game changer. This is what allows you to create intergenerational wealth. And the Rockefellers mastered it because they now have, they're worth over 50, I think it's over $150 billion. Whenever a child is born, they open up a whole life insurance policy. The younger you are, the lower the premium. So if you are less than 10, or if you have children, you open up a whole life insurance policy. You can open up $100,000 policy paying $50 a month, $100 a month, depending on the company. And when they turn 18, you're talking about bestowing them an endowment. You talk about endowments. I mean, these are how we can create these funnels of cash that can be used for if we want to create that intergenerational wealth. You want to buy that house, have that money sit there for about 10 years, putting in $200-300 a month, never touching it, forgetting about it, and then see how that thing appreciates up to 11%, and see what that looks like in about a decade and what you can do with that. And again, making small payments. Now, if you are an adult and you're in your 40s or 50s, you will pay a little bit more. So what your initial policy, you should get in your name, but then other policies, open them in your child's name, and you be the authority or the administrator of that policy, so you have access to it as well. So these are ways that you can start to create the wealth that the Rockefellers have created. And through pillow talk and gluttony and ego and narcissism, the information is available to us now.
Okay. That's really important to understand. You know, I think about ways that you could also use cryptocurrency over a long-term basis to create intergenerational wealth. And
Absolutely.
I see it as something that you could do for families, but I also see it as something that you could do for organizations. I'm thinking about an organization that I'm involved in right now, looking at it long term. You know, with unions, people in essence, they buy insurance. And then over a period of time, they're able to get a return on that investment insurance. But I'm just thinking, you know, you got 2,000 people who are giving you $100 a year, and you put it in the best performing real world asset on the planet right now. In 5 years, you'll have capital that you can use to pay benefits to your members that, you know, I mean, again, it's leveling the playing field because it's giving people access to capital. But, you know, we just have this apprehension about getting involved in something that we don't understand. So it really makes it difficult to sell folks on the idea. You've been involved in it for some time. What type of movement or what type of momentum have you been able to see over the time that you've been connected to it as a paradigm?
Well, I got involved with Bitcoin in 2012. Um, and so I've seen it go through the scrutiny. I've seen it go through the crypto winters. I know that there's a pattern now that we're in where every 4 years there's a 3 year increase and 1 year decline. Whereas we've seen that happen 3 times now, and we're approaching the we're into the second year of the 3 year growth. Okay, we just seen what was it earlier this year? Bitcoin surpassed 100,000. Now I don't know what's up with the other coins, man. I don't know what's up with Ethereum and XRP. Why they haven't come? Because usually Bitcoin brings everybody with it, but it is coming. The growth is coming, but the adoption is what's key, and it's becoming more global. We're starting to see again countries that are using it as their viable income, viable source of for their economy. And so, for me, it's really about understanding that this is a they use the term hodl, hold on for dear life, and what that means is if you have crypto, uh, don't be so quick to get rid of it, even especially during the crypto winters when it goes down in value. As you mentioned, stocks was down a few weeks ago and now it's up again. This is what this this is why this is why I implore financial therapy is so important. Before you get into any kind of finances, understand what the history of money is, and that the fluctuation that we speak of, the Rothschilds dynasty, the banking family dynasty would not be were it not for the Napoleonic Wars. The Napoleonic Wars was where France was against Britain, right? Real quick. And so the Rothschilds family, look, Nathan Rothschild had 5 sons. And these sons were governing the finances of different countries, even countries that were warring against each other, right? So you have Britain and France fighting each other. Come to find out that the Rothschilds were the head of both economies. These are brothers. So they came up with this scheme to let people think that Napoleon was winning the fight. And Rothschilds has started to liquidate his stocks. So he's like E.F. Hutton. People listen to him. Whatever he do, people follow. So he's liquidating his stocks, and guess what? Everybody starts liquidating their stocks, right? Because he's doing it, not because they did their diligence, but because they see him doing it. FOMO, fear of missing out. So as he sold all his stocks, his brother bought the stocks that he sold, and everybody else that sold their stocks. So come back the next day, Rothschild's like, "Oh, I have this information," or not the next day, but sometime after. Actually, France was losing the war, so people went back to scurry to go and buy their stocks back. Well, guess who they had to buy their stocks from now? They had to buy it from the Rothschild's brother. So he named his price, and they made a killing. So what am I saying? When you see the stock market go down, rest assured the majority of the people who are ill-informed about how money works are going to say, "I'm losing money. I'm going to sell. I'm going to sell." I've had so many people. I had clients when we were starting cryptocurrency. They would buy Bitcoin or Ethereum or XRP, and because it went down $10, they were ready to sell, right? And so multiply that by the millions of people that are in the stock game, that are in cryptocurrency, etc., that are ill-informed about the long game. Like you mentioned, if you look at a graph and you see these up and down hills, but if you expand it to a year, to 5 years, 10 years, it's an upward trajectory. This is a long-term game. So you have to hodl. You have to hold on to those coins if that is what you want to create. Now you can pull out a little bit here and there, but never sell an appreciating asset. And understand what you're invested in. Understand not just what the coin is, what is the industry, what is the technology, what is becoming behind it, what is blockchain, what is the other monetary things that are coming from it, from this space. And when you understand that now, then you can go ahead and let your money sit there or your coins sit there and let them just grow over time and pull out every once in a while a little bit something to do something fun with it. So that's the
Yeah.
goal, is to think about, what this game is. But it starts with understanding the history. We have to understand the temperament of what we've been taught, because we operate on FOMO, fear of missing out, and that's our problem.
Yeah. And the reality is that because of sentiment, because of public awareness, folks find out about it when it's way up there.
Oh, yeah. Always.
So
Always.
you
Fourth
bought
quarter.
Bitcoin at 103 and then it goes down to 100
Yep.
or 90 and you like, I lost my money. I'm out.
But that's
You
not to
know,
say don't invest. If you just now found out about Bitcoin 2 days at 103,000, still get a little something, because it will be 200,000 and you'll be happy
right.
eventually. And the other thing is, you don't have to. I mentioned about buying one Bitcoin at 103,000. You don't have to have $103,000 to buy Bitcoin. All you need is $2. You got $1.99. You can buy a percentage of Bitcoin or any other. It's called a fractured. I forgot what the term of it, but the bottom line is you can buy fractions of the token or fractions of even stock. The stock game changed because of Bitcoin. As far as now, you used to have to buy whole shares. Now you can buy fractions of it, because they understand any money is good money. So if you buy $2 worth and you let it sit, you will, and if you monitor it, not every day, but if you look at it every month or something, you'll see some activity of growth and probably some loss. But 6 months, as time goes on, you'll see even more growth. And here's the thing. We have the money. If you really think about budgeting, and if you understand, this is something that I teach in my classes. If you know how to budget your money, you have money outside of all your expenses. You have a little bit of money sitting on the side. That's the money you can use. You don't have to pull from your savings right now. You have money, if you are budgeting correctly, where you can take this certain amount every month and just put it into something like a whole life insurance policy or a cryptocurrency.
Okay. So they call that stacking Satoshis. The increments of Bitcoin that you can buy, the smaller increments are called Satoshis. So stack some
Right.
Satoshis, hold on to those bad boys because, yeah, you got in at 103, give it a year and it'll
Yeah.
be 200 and then you're ahead of the game.
Fact.
We are going to shift over to our online platform in just a few moments. So I want to remind you that we are on YouTube and we are on Facebook at 360 Info Network and also my Facebook page. Want to send a shout out to our engineer, Tone Harley, for making this simulcast possible. We appreciate you, brother. And without you, we could not do this. So thank you for that. Don't forget Larchmere Arts on the 7th of June. It's percussion and poetry. And also, you'll be listening to Gloria Jones and her fantastic quintet. With that, as always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, make today your best day. Peace.
Bless up. Bless up.
All right. We are exclusively on YouTube channels and Facebook pages right now. So if you are with us, you are going to get the benefit of an incredible slide presentation that Brother M'Bwebe has prepared. He is a financial therapist and you can engage his services. You can take advantage of his knowledge and put yourself in position where you can hodl some coins. Now, we talked a little bit about Bitcoin. I'm an XRP person. So
Okay.
you talked about the use case. You didn't use those terms, but basically you're talking about utility. And when it comes to cross-border payments, XRP is that token. The country of Japan is implementing XRP as something that they are working with. You talked about El Salvador and what's going on with Bitcoin being their national currency. And as I am told, their economy has actually had an upswing. Before they made this move, it was on the way down. Now, they're in a sense or a space of recovery as a result of cryptocurrency. And I have to point out that about 4 years ago, you had people like Larry Fink at BlackRock, who is, sitting on top of the world's most prosperous firm in terms of handling people's money. I think they have something like $10 trillion in assets, and they were poo-pooing Bitcoin, and they were
Mhm.
poo-pooing cryptocurrency, and they were buying into that narrative that, it's just used for illicit purposes, the money laundering and all this other kind of stuff. You know, you look at the Christine Lagardes of the world, and her ideas about having central bank digital currencies, and people should not have cash on hand. If you have more than $500 or 500 euros in cash, then you must be up to something dastardly, and so you shouldn't have that. And it just goes back to that whole paradigm of control of currency. But then you have the whole world of decentralized finance and your ability to be your own bank. When you talked about that whole life insurance policy, you're basically talking about positioning yourself to be your own bank. And I
Yes.
and the thing that I also want to get to is what you mentioned about trusts. So, you can have those things in place, but in order to protect your assets, you want them to be in a trust so that they are out of the way of the probate court that's going to take a percentage of it just because they can, and
Mhm.
support that extra layer of exploitation that exists in this great country that we call America. So, just so that the folks can get a better picture of how they can benefit, there are some mechanics involved. Being your own bank means that you want to have a device that you can store your assets on that keeps them out of harm's way. So can we talk about some of the things that you can implement as measures to have more control of your assets? And I want to highlight what you said about not putting your money in the bank, because people really don't realize, in addition to that 10x multiplier, when you put your money in the bank, it's not your money anymore.
Yep.
So when you go to the bank and you say, "Hey, I got 250 G's in the bank, I like to walk out of here with them," they can't give you $250,000 because they don't have $250,000 in the bank.
They don't.
Because when they 10x'd it, they didn't create new physical money. They just got credit
Mhm.
for $10,000 in the bank, which they loan to somebody else, charge them interest, and make more fake money.
Mhm.
So, so
Mhm.
talk to us about the mechanics of becoming your own bank.
So, infinite banking. R.A. Nelson wrote a book about infinite banking that I really gravitated towards, and that really is talking about the importance of how you can use uh, other methodologies, other money methodologies to protect and grow your funds. We spoke about the banking system and what they do with your funds. The most important thing that I got out of it is that when you are going to put your money in a space, you need to think about, especially when it comes to crypto. You even have to be careful about who you're putting your money in with. For instance, everybody says, "Oh, I use Coinbase," and Coinbase. I was with Coinbase in the beginning because it was user friendly, and I didn't mention it before, but cryptocurrency is supposed to come with a certain level of autonomy. Um, you're basically supposed to not. You're supposed to be able to be nameless, you know. But when Coinbase came out, that was their whole thing. We're going to protect your identity, blah blah blah. Come to find out that they were in bed with the government because the government they blew up too big. This was a November Thanksgiving of 20, I can't remember, was it 2018 or 2017, where everyone started buying cryptocurrency, and Coinbase blew up to the point where the site went down because of bottleneck traffic. It wasn't prepared for all these people investing at the same time. But that raised the flag. The U.S. government got involved. They were like, "Hey, we need to know about who these people are, where they're putting their money, the dark web, blah blah blah." All these different reasons of why they want to know who was have the identities of these people, and so they settled with giving them a percentage of the names. They said they went public and said they give a percentage. They gave them 12,000 names. They said at the time. I don't believe that. I definitely believe that your information is public through Coinbase and probably other ones. But the point is that you really can't hide away in the digital world. Your IP address is going to tell you who you are. So the point is you really can't unless you're using VPN. But the point is that there are ways to identify. So it isn't about trying to be a spook or trying to, stay under the radar or whatever. Everybody's doing it's going to become normal. So just accept that point. However, I am careful about where I put my crypto. So you have Coinbase and other spaces that are online based called hot wallets. There's hot wallets and there's cold storage. Hot wallets are internet based sites like your Coinbase. So you log on and you using someone else's platform and you can manage and see what your information is. Not many have been hacked that have been made publicly. Just like people don't know that every day banks are hacked on a daily and they pay the ransom, but they don't let people know because if you knew it, you would take your money out, right? So I know that there's some hacking happening and they're paying them off. But you can alleviate all of that if you would use cold storage. Cold storage devices that there is a higher level of responsibility though, because the cold storage devices are in your person. So you can't blame someone if you lose their device. You got to blame yourself. You can't call Coinbase, hey, how come the site is down? Or how come my drive isn't working? So if you're going to do cold storage, you need to put it in a place that you can get to, but also it's protected, from people, from weather, etc. And you'll find that I've had clients that have taken a cold storage and stored into a bank vault, which to me was asinine. Like, what are you doing? But again, it's the mindset. We have been seduced to believe that the bank is the place to trust your money. And they did that because if you understand history and all the depressions in the 1930s, there was bank runs, and they went on this campaign because they were going through the process of changing us from using federal notes. When we talk about Jekyll Island, you got to, again, do your history, is that they were moving us to accepting the new monetary system of paying taxes. And so they had to put this trust in the banks again after you had the Great Depression, because people were like, your great grandparents or grandparents will probably still remember, I didn't put my money in the bank. I had my money buried in the backyard, or I had it in the Folgers jar or in the freezer. That's why I saved my money, because I didn't trust the banks. And they had reason. It wasn't ghetto. It was because they understood that banks were stealing their money. So basically what I'm saying is with infinite banking, it allows you to both protect, grow, and have access to your funds at will. You just have to have the discipline to put it in the place that you're not going to keep touching it. And if you set up again a trust behind it, then it allows you to do dividend payouts if you want, for instance. And I always weave into history because it's important. But Cornelius Vanderbilt, the railroad tycoon, who was once the richest man in the world, when he died, he was worth over $4.7 trillion. It was 100 billion back then, but it was worth 4.7 in today's money. He told his sons to keep the money together. And within the sons grew the company to 200 million. So they 100%, they grew at 100%. But then 2 generations later, they lost everything. They were buying mansions on Fifth Avenue. A lot of the museums in New York City on Fifth Avenue are ex-mansions, or they were torn down. And the only remnants of Vanderbilt today is Gloria Vanderbilt and Anderson Cooper, who used to be with CNN. So the point is that they lost the riches, but Rockefeller understood the importance of keeping money together, and he understood that if you put it in a trust first, that you can have dividend access. So for instance, once you grow a certain amount of money and you want to have it trickle down throughout your bloodline, in your trust, where you can make it up any way you want, any rule you want, any board members you would like, you can say on a monthly basis, a bi-weekly, semi-annually, however you want to do it, I will pay my bloodline or give them a dividend. I will give them $1,000 or $500 every 2 weeks or whatever. So they don't have full access like it's an ATM and going and pull everything out, and allows it to grow. This is another component of infinite banking, because you do want to have access to it, but not full access. You want to allow it to grow, and it behooves you to let it sit and grow for a while before you actually, allow people to get access to it.
Mm. Another thing that is relevant is just the portability of money. When you get on an airplane and you fly to another country, they want to know how much cash do you have,
Mm-hmm. Right.
you know,
Right.
and they can take it from you if they want to,
Yep.
you know. But with the cold storage devices, you could have multiple devices so that you don't have all your eggs in one basket,
Right.
you
Right.
know. And then the portability of that as opposed to gold. Of course, you could have 5 gold coins that are an ounce a piece and they're worth like 3,200 a piece,
Mm-hmm.
but if you got bars, you can't get on the plane with the bars.
You don't want to get on the plane with no bars.
Right, right. So there
Yeah.
are so many advantages, but we have to unlock our mind from the mindset, first of all, that our money in the bank is in a safe place, because it's
Right.
not,
It's not.
and as we've said before, it ain't your money if it's in the bank. So it's better to be in that Folgers can or in
Mm-hmm.
the freezer than to be sitting at Chase Bank in a savings account that's earning 0.01% a year.
Facts. Facts.
I'm saying that, and I'm guilty, M'Bwebe. I'm guilty. I got
But the only problem is
$1,000.
though, the only problem is if you have it sitting in your house, it's not growing either. It's just sitting
Right,
there. So you
right.
want it to grow. So you want to put it in something that, and our grandparents didn't have another place to put it to grow. This is where digital currency allows you that ability to just hold on to it, and it does grow exponentially over time. So that's the beautiful thing about what cryptocurrency brings to the table, is that it has that ability. If you look at those, if you go to you can go to cryptomarketcap.com, and you could look at the behaviors of certain coins, and don't look at it from today and last week. Go back 3 years, go back 5 years. That'll give you an idea of where it's going, and you're going to see that it is a trajectory of an incline. We even through the crypto winters, when it's a downward period, you're still going to see that it's when it goes down, it's going to be higher than it was before the last crypto winter. So it's always higher than what it was before its last cycle. And that's the beautiful thing about it. It's going to continue to grow. And it's still very early.
Yeah,
It's not global adoption yet.
right. And XRP global adoption. Okay,
So
it's happening right
I
now.
have, just so you know, I got XRP too. So I'm
Okay.
with you on that. I'm definitely, and I'm
Yeah,
waiting for them too, because I want to see that happen too. And that's the thing, you diversify. You can get a little bit of everything, when I say everything, not the over, what is it, 1.5 million? No, coins out there.
15
No,
million. 15 million.
15 million, 15 million, not those. Do your diligence. To me, I can't go wrong with the OGs. Go with the
Right,
top five, and even I'll say even top three. And to me, that is Bitcoin, Ethereum, and XRP.
right.
You can't go wrong.
So I want to underscore the importance of doing your homework as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because for those of you who are watching it right now, this is the game. This is where you see the exponential gains in your cryptocurrency. You get in projects that have merit, that have utility when they're in their beginning stages, because that's when they're going to be most affordable
Mm-hmm.
and they have the most room for growth. So you get in when they're, a few $1 million, but you did your homework because you know that this particular token has a place in this new digital economy. They have
Mm-hmm.
something called ISO 222. And there
Mm-hmm.
are certain coins that have already been identified as being compliant with those. So
Mm-hmm.
you want to look at those types of tokens, because those other 15.12 million tokens, they don't have a place in that. So you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to set yourself up for failure by making those investments.
Mm-hmm.
You can get a few different cryptos, but it's the same as it is with the stock game. You do your homework on those investments before you make them. So don't just go on there because you saw somebody on a YouTube video that said, buy this token,
Right.
because sometimes they might give you good advice, but you come back to it 4 weeks too late
Right.
because the money has already been made. It's gone up and gone down. So to your point about taking that long-term view, you can see the performance of a token and see that perhaps because of something that happened, it's news that people understand about what's going on with it, you can make that investment because that particular coin is going to come back,
Hmm.
but there's risk involved in any investment. And that's the number one rule. You got to realize that there is risk involved. Sometimes you can make a lot of money, sometimes you can lose money, but
Hmm.
you can't blame anyone but yourself if you didn't do your homework about those things. Brother, you have a presentation that you want to share with us. So,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So this is going to kind of get into um, our need for the for financial therapy, because I feel like the biggest part of, before you talk about investing in money, we need to understand, the game itself, and that we're not privy about the origin of the way money was created. And this is why it's so confusing. And this is why we get involved in things not knowing that, okay, it's rigged for you to fail. If you don't do your diligence, if you don't know the identifiers, then you are going to have a hard time struggling to understand finances. And a lot of us don't have the patience. So what we'll end up doing is we'll end up giving up on the pursuit of trying to become financially educated. So I mentioned this earlier, but this is I always speak about this because it is systemically designed. What Jim Rohn said: if you don't design your own life plan, chances are you'll fall into someone else's plan. And guess what they have for you? Plan for you? Not much. It's very important to understand that part, because everything that's in place right now has been put in a way that someone designed it for it to operate. For, in order for it to have this massive to be so productive, as far as like the master strategy, is because someone designed it and put it in place, and it's being implemented to this day. But in essence, this is what life's supposed to be like. As I mentioned, we're the only species on the planet that has to pay to live here. You don't see birds and bees out there trying to pay a broker to find a tree for them to put their nest in. And money truly has gotten in the way of what living experience is supposed to be like. And so because of that, we have lost our common sense to understand, because it's all about making sense. We haven't understood that. Because of that, there are other things that we don't attribute to our lack in awareness of finances. And that, to me, is brother, can you pull me up on the side too? There, trying to yeah, let me see. Put the camera aside. There we go. That's fine. Or if you want to, yeah, that's fine. So we don't attribute. So a lot of our issues go with money also has impositions on our health. And the Department of Justice said the number one killer in America is stress. A lot of us are dealing with stress on a daily basis. So I'm a lover of acronyms. And to me, stress breaks down to someone trying to repair every situation solo. We are afraid to ask for help. We're too embarrassed to talk about how broke we are. So we won't go out and seek that type of advice. And if we are speaking to someone that knows about it, we won't ask questions to those questions that are over our head. We'll just nod our head and keep it moving. Meanwhile, we're still suffering. We're still suffering. And because of that, there are stressful components that are being added to our lives. And that trickles down into the family. This creates a fight or flight type of psychosis in us. The adrenaline is being used when you are stressed out and you're in the car throwing F-bombs because things are not going your way. This adrenaline is being it's accumulating in your body. And if you don't do something about releasing it, it can turn into toxicity and possibly in a fatality. Um, so what we do is we sit there and we take a lot of this stuff that's happening to us. We just accept it. We just induce it. And this is what the rat race psychosis is all about. Hypertension in people of African descent in the United States, those that are ages 40 plus, have high blood pressure, 64%. 62% have high cholesterol. I'm sorry, obesity is 62%, high cholesterol is 39%, and diabetes is 23%. So stress is playing a part in our being unhealthy. And what do you do when you are stressed? I need a drink. I need to go get something to eat that ain't good for me. So our health is linked to our finances, but we don't have those type of discussions. And it's because of that, we don't know how to bring these things together. So I created these graphs to think about what's happening mentally. The stress is, the diet, we're having less physical activity because we're sitting at the desk or the kiosk. We have anxiety. We're still dealing with racism, world events, fear of messing out, FOMO, adulting. Just being an adult is like, oh, sometimes you're just like, I'm just tired of adulting. And then we have those relationships. And then when you want to cross that with finances, we have the education, or we're trying to attain it. We don't have the money, or we have the degrees, but we don't have the money to pay it off, or it's taking forever to pay it off. We have all the certifications, but can't find a job because, again, when we look at it, job markets aren't like the NBA where you play in college and then you can have a draft to go and play in the league. When you get your degree, you're on your own. Your university doesn't guarantee you a job. They want you to be alumni though and give them money every year, but they won't guarantee you a job. So you're on your own. Job stability is declining. Mortgage rates are going higher, living expenses, investment risks, and inflation. When you bring all these things together, these are things that we are dealing with on a daily basis, which is adding to the stress that we have. And adulthood should not include stress. It should be synonymous with adulthood. Other triggers are racism and economic disparity, housing rights, judicial police brutality, inflation, health, and hypertension. All this leads to early transition. And for generations, our bodies have become calcified because we're numb now, because we're just dealing with it. And if you can't convince your cells of your greatness, you cannot conjure the universe to bring what you desire, because every cell in your body is eavesdropping on your cells. If you say, I don't feel good, guess what? Your cells hear it and they're going to operate as such, right? So the trigger, I think, to all of this is because a lot of our issues are dealing with the lack of, or at least lack of, understanding of money. Something we fight for every day we get up and go. And the market is rigged for us to make us worker bees. As John Rockefeller said, as we mentioned earlier, he said, I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers. And he's created it so that we think getting a job is being successful. When I was young, I was told, you need to get a job. What do you want to be when you grow up? Who you want to work for? Never, do you want to own your own business? Do you want to own your own time? These are things that we have never been access to. But when you think about this job that we've surrendered our lives to, these are the best hours of our lives. Now think about this. On an average, we work 8 hours, 8+ hours, and then you have about 4 to 6 hours before you go to sleep. So of those 4 to 6 hours, a lot of us will use that to just unwind, right? And when you do the math and you add these things up, 6 hours a day adds up to 2016 hours a year of just wasting your time, right? And so the question is, well, how many hours does it take to be a master of something? We know that that's 10,000 hours. So really what's happening is within 5 years, you have become a master of wasting time. And a lot of us have been doing this for not 5 years, but for 10, 20, 15. So we have PhD level master's degrees of wasting time. And there's something that the rich folk live by, and it's called the 5-hour rule. And it basically means if you're not spending 5 hours a week learning, you're being irresponsible. So I added on, if you're not spending 5 hours a week learning about money, you're being financially irresponsible. 5 hours a day is roughly 43 minutes a day, 7 days a week if you want it, to learn something about finances, right? So I feel like we all need financial therapy. We don't necessarily need a financial planner, because a financial planner is someone that's going to manage your funds. They have the intention and an awareness and knowledge, and they use it over your head because, of course, you think that they're the expert, right? They know about finances, so I'm going to believe everything they tell me. But they may plan your investments and they might do your estate planning, but understand that they are a salesman. They're not vested in your wellness. They're actually trying to get a percentage. They get paid on commission. So their investment is to make money off of you. And the more you don't know, the more money they can make, right? But as a financial therapist, I see this as, I help you face the origin of your relationship with money. And then I expose you to the systemic connection, and then it prepares you to become your own planner. You don't need a financial planner once you know how the system works. You can plan it for yourself and set it up the way you need to, right? So we all need financial therapy, but don't really know it. Um, what stressful thoughts of do I have enough? I hope they don't raise my rent, or the anxiety of realizing you have 20 plus more years to pay the bank off until you own your home, but you just heard there may be layoffs right before Christmas. And the American dream, as we all aspire to attain, is that house and that white picket fence, right? Mine is black. But the point is that it's that 15 to 30-year contract that we set up with the bank to pay this house off. As I mentioned in the first hour, that you are promising the bank that you're going to pay this off within 15 to 30 years every month with this amount, right? And the amortized schedule changes. The monetary number will go up, but you'll still pay the money, right? But you don't have a 15 to 30-year agreement with your job, the person that's paying you that enables you to pay the bank to pay your mortgage, right? So you don't have that guarantee. But a lot of us are not realizing this perspective. The bank is not going to tell you that if you go 90 days past your payment, well, they will tell you this, they'll take your house. But it doesn't matter at what point. You could be in your 29th year, as I mentioned, and a few months to go before it's fully paid off. But if you are 90 days past, they will take it all. And that is in the agreement that you signed. Okay. So here's the key. No employer is obligated to pay you for life. One day you will be laid off, fired, or if lucky, retire. And this is when your income ends. No job is guaranteed for life. Just understand that. You could have been there for 25 years. And there's not too many people that have been in a job for 20 years these days, right? And with artificial intelligence on the rise, we're seeing more and more people being laid off. So your job is not guaranteed, but you're telling the bank you're going to pay for this house. So you got to find other ways to be able to do that, or you're going to lose the roof over your head. So our relationship with money is rooted in fear. If you think about it, we are trying to attain money to pay something off. It's not really to attain money to have it build and multiply. Even though that's what we wish we could do with it, these bills are in the way, right? So I, again, lover of acronyms. I see fear as funds exhausted, awards restrictions. If you don't have the money, you can't do anything. You got to pay your bills every month. You could sit there and window shop all you want. And one day, layaways don't happen anymore. So if you don't have the money, you're not going to get it, right? But with proper therapy that I like to offer, fear will be changed to finances explained, AIDS resilience. You can change that fear into something as a tool, a power tool. When you understand how money works, then you can use that to create and build wealth intergenerationally that'll put you in a space that you've never thought you've ever been in. But this is what they don't teach you in school. And I want to give you a little briefing about the history of money, how it was created, because it's important to understand that everything has an origin. And in systemic designs, they had this thing put in play, and they are adding on to it as we go, but it's been so effective, although we're seeing a decline in it right now. We're seeing that, especially things with cryptocurrencies, and we're seeing things with BRIC, who are trying to pull away from the USD. We've seen the petrodollar is losing its value. So we are seeing America decay, this monetary system decay, but still, let's understand how it was created and how it rose, right? Rose to be what it is. So I'm always about timelines and looking at what's happening. And so I go into detail in my courses, but I'm just going to give you just an overview of what this talks about. How did America get started? We talk about in the Bill of Rights of 1791, banks were basically owned by private investors and mainly overseas in Britain. And so they used this money to fund the American Revolutionary War. And the first bank opened here in 1791. In 1861, we had the first printed of the U.S. notes. Were called greenbacks, right? So that was when we started first seeing money. Instead of carrying big bags of of gold and silver, they created these paper notes that allowed things to be as representatives of those fortunes, right? But what's interesting is when we moved to 1871, we started seeing a second America being created. And this is when America became a corporation. From that, we've seen all the corporation entities coming under the USA banner, the USDA, FEMA, NIST, NASA, TSA, et cetera. You see all here. There's hundreds more of other corporations. America is a corporation. It is a business. And if you know anything about trusts, we are corporations per our signing of our birth certificate and our social security number. Okay. And I know some of this is over your head, but I'm just giving you seeds. If you want to water this seed, you will do the diligence. And also you can contact me. I can help you with that information. But I'm just fertilizing the land right now, right? So the Federal Reserve in 1913 is when we really started to see the corporation of the systemic design that we know now come into play. And this starts with the Rothschilds, Rockefeller, Paul Warburg, Jacob Schiff, and J.P. Morgan. If you ever you heard of Dr. Jekyll, but you ever heard of Jekyll Island, it's something to really study, because this is when we see that these men came together and decided the fate of how America was going to change. Less than 100 years from uh, the forefathers leaving England, we see that banks were being replicated in America as they were in England. Rothschilds was known as saying, "Let us control the money of a country, and we care not who makes its laws." So Rothschilds, remember I told you before about how they were able to take over from the Napoleonic Wars. They didn't care about. They didn't want to be the face. They didn't want to be because they understood that rulers rule forever. And these people, these puppets they put in front of us, your Trumps, your Queen of Elizabeth of whatever, they are ran by banking industries or banking dynasties, and Rothschild is at the top of the helm of that. So we're seeing that the 16th Amendment was added, where they started to implement the tax code. And this is before the 1930s, where we didn't pay taxes. But in my book on page 85 to 91, I speak about it in detail. Real quickly, just an excerpt. On the night of November 22nd, 1910, a group of newspaper reporters stood disconsolately in the railroad station at Hoboken, New Jersey. They had just watched a delegation of the nation's leading financiers leave the station on a secret mission. It would be years before they discovered what the mission was. And even then, they would not understand that the history of the United States underwent a drastic change after that night in Hoboken. Eustace Mullen said this. So we saw that these men went down to Georgia, island called Jekyll Island that was owned by J.P. Morgan, and stayed there for 9 days. And they created the Federal Reserve Note, the Federal Reserve Act, and the tax code. And from this is where we started seeing where now all of a sudden we were forced, or not even forced, we were coerced into paying taxes. And they did it with the help of President Woodrow Wilson, who on his deathbed is said to have said that he misled America. He said, is quoted as saying, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. No longer government by free opinion, no longer government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but of government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men." They bought him. This is when Rockefeller and them started buying politicians to pass legislation for things that they wanted in their interest. And one of them was making us pay taxes, right? Or again, having us believe we have to pay taxes. Because I'm not saying do what Wesley Snipes does, but if you understand about trust, you can get around it. But what we saw was a changing of the guard. So here's what happened in 1933, shortly after, is that under Roosevelt, we saw that there was a mandate to confiscate all gold from American civilians. It was illegal to have gold. They confiscated all the gold and they put it in Fort Knox, allegedly. And then that somehow ended up in Queen Elizabeth's vault. But they stole the money, or stole the wealth, the gold from Americans. It was illegal to have it. And they gave you these promissory notes in exchange. This is what we started seeing, how they were now trying to control how you would disperse and basically harbor your wealth. We also find it 40 years later that on August 15, 1971, we saw fiat currency being created. We went from gold and now we're going into what's called the petrodollar. This is when Nixon, who went to Saudi Arabia to create these weapon and oil deals, to get the Saudis to only accept people buying oil through USD. And once that happened, once they accepted that, then that made the American dollar the power that it has been since then. Now it is declining, but that made it the power that it has been. And if you know anything about Rockefeller, the oil, he was an oil tycoon. So he became a billionaire overnight once the petrodollar was created. And foreign currencies converted to USD for international trade and transactions. And therefore, if you were to buy any oil from anybody on the planet, you had to use American dollars, right? This created inflation because now you had printed money more than you needed. And if you have a little bit of everything, I mean, if you have, for instance, I'll use an example of a pair of classic Nike Air Jordans, right? If you have 2 pair, the value is much higher. But if you have a million pair, it's not as valuable because everybody has access to it. So this is what's happened with the dollar over time, is that everyone has access to it. So the value has gone down. So with this said, we talk about the debt that has been created from this, from inflation. And we see that the United States national debt topped $1 trillion on October 22nd, 1981, right? It took 204 years from 1776 to 1981 to get to $1 trillion in debt. Now you think that's a lot, but think about this next number. We are currently at 36 trillion, but it topped $34 trillion in 2023, January 2023. That took 42 years to amass 33 and now $35.2 trillion, because again, we're now at $36.8 trillion in debt. And that's the interesting thing that's about it, is because where is this money being, how is this money growing? How is this, this debt growing? And it's from inflation, outsourcing, and the military. And interestingly enough, August of 2023, America had a credit report rating where they were taken down to a AAA classification, down to a noticeably lower one at AA+. So interesting thing about it is they're honest about our credit report and our credit score, when America has a poor credit report and score too as well, with $36 trillion owed to somebody. Well, who are they owing it to? They owe it to China, Japan, United Kingdom, Ireland, Luxembourg, and guess where the rest 32 point plus billion dollars are owed to? You and me. It's owed to you and me through our Social Security. But this is a vault that they're using at will for subsidies, like giving Elon Musk hundreds of billions of dollars to do whatever he's been doing with his philandering, and also from bailouts. And we are finding that these funds are being pulled from our Social Security, and it is projected that by 2033 there'll be very little, if any, left. So right when I'm supposed to turn my 65 and receive my Social Security check, there may not be one coming. And they're trying to figure out another system right now. But the point is that these things have been happening all along. And if you want to understand how much America owes, you can go to this website called usdebtclock.org, and it'll give you a rundown of breakdown of all of the finances that are, and it's a live figure. So the numbers are going actively live right now. And it just tells you where all of these deficits are headed, or who they're owed to. Now, in closing, I just want to say that, we need to look deeply at how we think, feel, communicate, and behave differently with money to improve our overall well-being. This is why I implore financial therapy is important, because we don't understand that this is systemically designed as bigger than you. However, you can still find your place in this and create intergenerational wealth, understanding the proper channels and proper implementation. Because we are really good at struggle, right? We were born into it. And I always hear about, Black people, we've taken lemons and made lemonade. And we say that so proudly. Yeah, we took lemons and made lemonade. But I like to go a step further. Why not think about growing the lemon tree? So when you make that lemon and you squeeze out the water and you throw away the seed, you are throwing away your ability to become independent. Why not keep the seed planted and grow your own lemons? And then you could have lemonade whenever you want. This is breaking the ideology of the not having the pot to piss in mentality. Because we've been told you're so poor you don't have a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of. That's because we don't know about monetary value, how to make money works, how to make it work for us instead of us working for it. It's something that's been embedded genetically into us. And the component of it, or the draw to keeping us from being in this space, is because we like the material shiny things that they promote to us all the time. We need to be able to eradicate that mindset and get back into thinking about how can we build wealth intergenerationally using the same tactics that these rich white folks do. It's no different than what we're doing. So with that said, in order to do that, financial literacy has to be a topic in our communities. We can't keep getting together and never talk about not getting together. We can have all the cookouts we want. The weather's, the summer's coming. We can have all these barbecues. If we could just take 10, 15 minutes to talk about finances, we would be better off the next year and the following, especially for our bloodline. So the conversation of having, we need to have about finances is very important. And I hope that you consider that. And this is a book I wrote, The Pot That Piss and Intergenerational Wealth Planning for Black People. I think that if we start talking about these conversations openly and not worrying about, having that conversation about money turn into a fight because cousin Ray still owe you $20, he ain't paid you back 6 months ago, and really talk about the bigger picture, I think that we would be in a better space moving forward, especially for what's coming. So this is a new site that's coming up that I'll be dropping in a few weeks. That's going to give you full access to how I can help assist you in your growth in becoming financially independent and creating that wealth for your bloodline. And also, I just wanted to point out that this is a world premiere. This is the book that I have coming out in a couple of weeks that I think that you will find also is important. It's called From Railroads to Robots. And this book is talking about the evolution of power and wealth, eugenics' role in oligarchs and monopolies. We have to understand, again, the systemic design. And in this book, I go into the comparison of the oligarchs of old, of the second industrial complex, of your Rockefellers, your JP Morgans, your Andrew Carnegies, and JP Morgans, and compare them to the oligarchs of today. Who are those? Your Bill Gates, your Jeff Bezos, and your Elon Musk, and how eugenics is behind the whole array of this. When we talk about what Ibrahim Traore is doing in Burkina Faso, and talking about our resources are our resources, we talk about cobalt, which is the main mineral used for technology, for our smartphones and devices, and what allows your phone to vibrate. This is in the Dominican Republic of the Congo. Without this place, 70% of the cobalt is taken from this space, and they are owned by companies like your Apples and your Microsoft and your Samsungs, etc. These are European nations and European companies, rather, that are exploiting our people, and we are on the verge of understanding the importance of us getting into understanding the value of manufacturing, understanding the value of investments, investing in ourselves, doing what Marcus Garvey tried to do in the 1930s, 1920s. We're seeing that rebirth happening now. So in this book, I go into detail about the comparison of what those oligarchs of the second industrial complex have done, comparing them to today, and also providing solutions, because the biggest component we need to be looking at is artificial intelligence. And how can we coexist, not as Elon Musk would like us to be with Neuralink and having neural implants put into our brains, no. But how can we coexist as far as getting in this space and being as developers and designers, just as not as consumers, and learning how we can use this technology to work in our favor. Okay. And lastly, I do consulting. So, my whole goal is to teach what I know and help other people, be it individuals, small organizations, and businesses. We need to become viable components in this space. We need to have our tech schools. We need to have our business programs, our businesses upgraded to using cryptocurrencies, understanding, as you mentioned before, about unions, Brother Vince, as how you can use this to create platforms that will allow you to become interdependent and not having to use a bank and facing arbitrage and racism with their interest rates, and learning how we can create the wealth that we can control. globally. So that, in a nutshell, was the presentation. Thank you for listening. But in general, that's the goal, is for us to understand how important it is for us to get in this space and be
Okay.
participants and developers.
You you used a million dollar word a few moments ago, and you did it a few other times. But for the folks who don't know what arbitrage is, could you let them know?
Arbitrage is really a term that is, for instance, it's a cliquish. It's, for instance, people that are going to do something to benefit themselves and leave everybody else out. So, if I know some things, I'm going to tell my people, but not everybody, because if I tell everybody, we can't take advantage. So that's what
Yeah.
banks do. That's what cliques do. That's what your billionaires do. They get in startups. I learned that Jeff Bezos's billions haven't come all from Amazon. It's come from early positioned startups. His people have told him this is going to be a big thing, and you need to put your money in it. And they do it, and it blows up. So we need to create our own arbitrage circles uh, that will allow us, and in these circles, invest in each other, but not just invest in each other for the hype, but understand that we have the position. Not as it's one thing to be an investor; it's another thing to befriend a developer, so that you have access to that developer. I don't want to invest in a European company and not know the person, but if you can create a viable, we have engineers around the world. We have all these degrees that we have. Why are we not putting these into play for ourselves? The many engineers, Black women are the highest educated women in America with the most degrees. So I'm calling on for our sisters to spearhead some think tanks and thought leaders to create industry, so that we can invest collectively in these spaces as developers, as engineers, not as just consumers, but be able to develop the technology as it continues to go, because that is what's opening here. We're seeing in Asia with the robotics industry, it's explosions left and right. And there's more than enough room for us to get involved, because our niche would be ourselves if we wanted to. It could be other people too, but we're not creating anything and marketing towards ourselves. Everyone else is. So why aren't we in this space to start doing things for ourselves? We know ourselves best. So that's the goal.
Okay. As I was watching your presentation, I was mindful of a phenomenon called the fourth industrial revolution,
Mhm.
which is where we find ourselves today.
Right now.
And I'm thinking about some of the architects of that, namely the World Economic Forum and the recently stepped down head of it, Mr. Klaus Schwab.
Mhm.
But even
Yeah.
though he stepped back a little bit, the plans are still going forth. But we're in the midst of a paradigm change, and I'm reflecting on the Jupiter Saturn conjunction that happened back in 2020,
Mm.
and the impact that it has had on the universe. Absolutely, but
Mm.
on the economic system of the planet, because
Mhm.
the energy of that was about expansion, but also restructuring. So I
Mhm.
think what we're seeing right now is the evidence of that phenomenon, and how things are being transformed. We talk about the stock market and the fact that they're moving the stock market to the blockchain,
Mhm.
which is really kind of antithetical,
Right.
because
Right.
it's supposed to be, it's a centralized situation, but we're
Right.
moving it into a decentralized
Decentralized.
space, which is really interesting. But I think the other thing that happens in this paradigm shift is a certain loss of autonomy.
Yeah.
We talked about transparency within this digital situation that kind of prevents you from being anonymous, being
Mhm.
invisible, so to speak. So even
Mhm.
within this new structure, there's a certain level of accountability. But I think the real key is the entry point. If I
Mhm.
wanted to buy Terminal Tower downtown Cleveland, I'd have to go through some procedures, some paperwork, all this other kind of stuff. But if I wanted to make an investment in Bitcoin, I could just buy it, acquire it, hold it, and let it grow in value.
Right.
This is something, and when I was at my my family's home over the holidays last year, I had a conversation with my godson, who was all of 17 years old. I said, you know, you might want to think about Bitcoin, buying some Bitcoin. Do you know that before that evening ended, he had figured out how to go online and buy some Bitcoin?
Exactly. They're a different breed, man.
They are.
Yeah.
I mean, our children today are special. You know, we're
Yeah.
kind of stuck in our old ways of thinking, but the young folk, they understand. I mean, you know, they'll go to the arena in San Antonio and buy some popcorn with Dogecoin and not think about it.
Right. Right.
We would struggle with that. I mean, you mean I'm not using a credit card? I'm not pulling cash out of my
Exactly.
pocket, you know,
Exactly.
but it's a whole new world, you know, and
It-
it
it-
just like you said earlier, you know, you can get with the program or get left in the dust.
yep. Yep.
So,
And that's something that I think about a lot is trying to, and that's what's keeping me young, is understanding that, you know, they gravitate toward it so easily, and it's become their norm. We've seen before, so we know that there was something before this, and so that's why we're slow to it and intimidated to it. Um, but as I say to folks, is that we still are in some point a leader to these young folk, and so we need to be in these spaces where we are learning from them as they are learning from us. But we also need to help them make sound decisions, because they will use it for other reasons, because they are being uh, shaped and molded to be just consumers. They're being molded to just give all your money through this thing, not as developers. And that's where the wisdom needs to come in, as far as like, okay, hey, can you code? Do you know anything about, you know, teaching, and even teaching older folks, these young folks that know stuff? Show your parents and your grandparents how to do these things if you're listening, because we are going to coexist in this space while we're here. And we need to be in a space where we can still, while we can, because I don't believe everything lasts forever, is that while we can participate in cryptocurrency the way we can, we should be getting involved. And it isn't just to have money for retirement. I think our money should be in a space of using it for philanthropy, because we need to be able to create these thought leading think tanks that will create our own facilities to create our versions of AI, our versions of cryptocurrency, our versions of blockchain, so that we can, if we need to, detach from what they're going to give us, because they won't give us a choice unless we make one. We will have to create something for ourselves that will be designed by ourselves. So I think that that's the pending question. The greatest challenge is for us to understand that it isn't just to be a participant, but what space do you see yourself in as an individual, as your family, and as a collective in this new fourth industrial complex that's
right.
arriving, that's here amongst us now.
Well, one more time, tell folks how they can reach you. I'm sure
Yes.
that after hearing what you have shared with them, they understand the compelling need to have some financial therapy.
100%. I hope, and I look forward to helping those that are doing. And you can reach me at cryptowokemovement.com. Um, and my new website, M'Bwebe Ishangi.com, will be coming out in the next few weeks. The next book that's coming out, from robots to from railroads to robots, will be dropping in a few weeks as well, which will give you even more detail and solutions. So stay tuned. And the goal is for me to try to get more of this information out to touch as many people while I'm here. That is my mission. When we talk about, I was talking about earlier about what we were born for, what's your purpose. This is my purpose, is to uh, get us to understand and so-called wake up to what's happening in the world, and know that you do have a place here, that your place needs to be bigger than yourself. We need to start thinking of ourselves as a collective. And that collective could be just as big as your family. It doesn't have to be, I know we can't save everybody. Save yourself and your family first, and then scale. But the goal is to look at financial therapy, look at the origins of money, how it works. And if it's not through me, do your own diligence and understand that so that you can become a participant as a developer and not just as a consumer. Ashe.
My brother, as we've had this conversation, there is a bird making a nest right
Ah,
outside my front window.
no
He didn't
permission
get a
needed.
building permit.
There you go.
They're,
I don't need to ask.
just
This is what I'm
doing what
setting
they
up
got to
about.
do.
That's
Yes,
what we need
indeed.
to be. That's how we need to move. Absolutely.
Yes,
What a way to end it. I love it.
yes, yes.
Absolutely, brother.
I want to thank you for that magnificent presentation. It's kind
Bless.
of funny because I have used some of the same things in some presentations that I've been doing within the past 4 years just to get folks to understand what happened in 1913, what happened
Mm-hmm.
on Jekyll Island, the things that Rothschild said and,
Mm-hmm.
others. The thing that stands out in my mind is Albert Einstein when he said that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world.
That's right. You either
You know,
pay it or you either pay it or you earn from it. Yeah. Yeah.
yes, yes, indeed.
Absolutely.
So,
Albert Einstein of all people. Yeah, I thought that was interesting when he
mhm,
said that too.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's obvious to me that we are traveling in the same circles of thought. We talked
Mhm.
about finances today, but I want to have you back on so we can explore those metaphysical things that we didn't get to
Oh
today.
man. Oh yes, we got to do that. We must do that.
Yes,
Absolutely, because it's all intertwined. Yeah.
it's all connected, unlike the allopathic method, which separates everything. But
Exactly.
mind, body, and spirit, they all work together. If you
Yes.
understand the very first principle, the
Yeah.
universe is
It's
mental.
mental. That's
And
right.
they control in our minds,
That's right.
so if you want liberation, you got to free your mind.
1000%.
Absolutely.
1000%. Ashe. Give thanks.
M'Bwebe Ishangi is a financial therapist. He is a cultural and memory recovery specialist and esteemed educator. And it has been an absolute pleasure and joy to have you on today. And we will look forward to the next one. Until then, as always, know yourself, love yourself, be yourself, and make today your absolute best day. Peace, y'all.
Bless.